The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse, Hawkins. The First Age, London. Horse-drawn carriages clattered down the streets of London in 1853. Gentlemen tipped their hats to ladies passing by. Children ducked and dodged on their way to school. But Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins had no time to be out and about. Waterhouse, as he liked to call himself, hurried toward his workshop in a park south of town. He was expecting some very important visitors. He didn't want to be late. As he neared his workshop, Waterhouse thought of the hours he'd spent outside as a boy. Like many artists, he had grown up sketching the world around him. By the time he was a young man, he'd found his true passion: animals. He loved to draw and paint them. But what he really loved was sculpting models of them. Through his care and hard work, they seemed to come to life. Now, Waterhouse was busy with a most exciting project. He was building dinosaurs. His creatures would prowl the grounds of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's new art and science museum, the Crystal Palace. Even though the English had found the first known dinosaur fossil many years before, and the bones of more dinosaurs had been unearthed in England since then, in 1853, most people had no idea what a dinosaur looked like. Scientists weren't sure either, for the only fossils were bits and pieces, a tooth here, a bone there. But they thought that if they studied a fossil and compared it to a living animal, they could fill the blanks. And so, with the help of scientist Richard Owen, who checked every muscle, bone, and spike, that's exactly what Waterhouse was doing. He wanted to create such perfect models that anyone, a crowd of curious children, England's leading scientist, even the Queen herself, could gaze at his dinosaurs and see into the past. Waterhouse threw open the doors to his workshop. Nervously, he tidied up here and there. His assistants came, then Richard Owen. At last the visitors arrived. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The Queen's eyes grew wide in surprise. Waterhouse's creatures were extraordinary. How on earth had he made them? He was happy to explain. The iguanodon, for instance, had teeth that were quite similar to the teeth of an iguana. The iguanodon then must surely have looked like a giant iguana. Waterhouse pointed out that a few iguanodon bones were helped to determine the model's size and proportion, and another bone, almost a spike, most likely sat on the nose, like a rhino's horn. Just so for the Megalosaurus. Start with its jawbone, compare it to the anatomy of a lizard, fill in the blanks, and voila! A dinosaur more than 40 feet long. Waterhouse was also making ancient reptiles and amphibians. While Richard Owen could imagine their shapes, it took an artist to bring the animals to life. Designing the creatures was only the first step. There was still the monumental task of building them. Waterhouse showed his guests the small models he'd made, correct in every detail, from scales on the nose to nails on the toes. With the help of his assistants, he had formed the life-size clay figures and created the molds from them. Then he erected iron skeletons, built brick foundations, and covered the whole thing with cement casts from dinosaur-shaped molds. It is no less, Waterhouse concluded, than building a house upon 4 columns. Drawing, small model, life-size, mold, iron skeleton, and the finished dinosaur. In the weeks to follow, Waterhouse basked in the glow of the Queen's approval, but he would soon face a much tougher set of critics, England's leading scientists. Waterhouse wanted to be accepted into this circle of eminent men. What would they think of his dinosaurs? There was only one way to find out. Waterhouse would show them. But why not do it with a little style? A dinner party, on New Year's Eve, no less. And not just any dinner party. Waterhouse would stage an event that no one would ever forget. He sketched 21 invitations to the top scientists and supporters of the day. The words inscribed on a drawing of a pterodactyl wing. He pored over menus with the caterer. The iguanodon mold was hauled outside. A platform was built. A tent erected. As the hour drew near, the table was elegantly set, and names of famous scientists, the fathers of paleontology, were strung above the tent walls. All was ready. With great anticipation, Waterhouse dressed for the occasion in his finest attire. He was ready to reveal his masterpiece. When the guests arrived, they gasped with delight. Waterhouse smiled as he signaled for dinner to begin. With solemn formality, the footman served course after course from silver platters. Up and down the steps of the platform, they carried the lavish feast. Rabbit soup, fish, ham, and even pigeon pie. For dessert, there were nuts, pastries, puddings, and plums. 2 footmen stayed busy simply pouring the wines. For 8 hours, the men rang in the new year. They laughed and shouted. They made speech after speech, toasting Waterhouse Hawkins. All the guests agreed. The iguanodon, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, was a marvelous success. By midnight, they were belting out a song, created especially for the occasion. The jolly old beast is not deceased. There's life in him again. The next months passed by in concrete, stone, and iron as Waterhouse put the finishing touches on his dinosaurs. Inside the iguanodon's lower jaw, he signed the work, B. Hawkins, Builder, 1854. The models were now ready for the grand opening of the Crystal Palace at Sydenham Park. 40,000 spectators attended the regal ceremony. In the sun-filled center court, Waterhouse mingled with scientists and foreign dignitaries. At last the Queen arrived. The crowd cheered, "Hooray!" Cannons boomed, music swelled, and a choir of 1,000 voices sang. Waterhouse bowed before the Queen. Then she and Prince Albert invited the spectators to enjoy the amazing sights. Waterhouse hurried to the lake and waited for the crowd to arrive. First 2, then 10, then a dozen more gasped, shrieked, laughed, and cried. So this was a dinosaur. Look at all those amazing dinosaurs. Waterhouse was thrilled, for in addition to being an artist, he also saw himself as a teacher. He was convinced that the best way for people to learn about something was to see it. Mrs. Sanger, too, I think that too. With this love of art and teaching, he knew he could do more. Educational posters, small models anyone could buy, lectures, books to illustrate. For the next 14 years, Waterhouse did it all. News of his success had reached America. In 1868, Waterhouse traveled to New York City, filling a lecture hall for talks about dinosaurs, evolution, even dragons. As he spoke, he stretched such marvelous illustrations that the audience burst into applause. And then Waterhouse received a delightful surprise, a letter from the head of Central Park inviting him to build American dinosaurs. His models would inhabit a museum planned for the park's southwest corner. Waterhouse was excited. America's first 2 dinosaurs, Hadrosaurus and Laplaps. I don't know if I said that right. Had only recently been discovered. Here was his chance to bring these dinosaurs to life for all to see. The Second Age, America. Waterhouse set right to work. He spent the next 6 months traveling to American museums to learn about American dinosaurs. Again, he built something no one had ever seen before, the first model of a complete dinosaur skeleton. He presented the Hadrosaurus to the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, where it was welcomed with great enthusiasm. Now, Waterhouse was ready to build his dinosaurs. He returned to New York City to the workshop built for him in Central Park. He hired an assistant, and the real work began. Small models, life-size clay figures, iron skeletons, dinosaurs. When he and his assistant toiled inside, workmen outside began building the museum. Like the Crystal Palace, the Paleozoic Museum would be an enormous structure of iron and glass with a beautiful arched ceiling. Day after day, workmen dug the foundation. Then disaster struck. William Boss Tweed, a corrupt politician who controlled much of New York City, said the museum was a waste of money. At 6 feet tall and 300 pounds, Boss Tweed was a big man with an even bigger thirst for power. He reorganized the Parks Department and put his own men in charge. Waterhouse watched in dismay as work on the museum was stopped. He began looking for a new home for his dinosaurs, but he was frustrated that a thieving scoundrel could thwart almost 2 years of work. In March of 1871, Waterhouse gave a speech at the New York Lyceum of Natural History. He stressed the importance of science and art, then shared the troubles he'd had with the boss. I trust, however, Waterhouse concluded, that in time the good sense of the people will awaken, and that they will realize the vast importance of my work. The audience agreed. One man called the boss greedy. Another said that the boss was an enemy of mankind. The New York Times printed it all. Waterhouse carried on with his work, but on May 3rd, his dream was shattered. Vandals broke into his workshop. Wielding sledgehammers, they smashed the dinosaurs. Then they carted the pieces outside and buried them in the park. Waterhouse arrived to find the chaos, chunks of rubble, mangled wire, plaster shards, and dust. He simply couldn't believe it. Oh no, poor Waterhouse. Waterhouse stumbled outside, only to find mounds of dirt and dinosaur rubble. 2 years of his life utterly ruined. This could only be the work of Boss Tweed. The more Waterhouse thought about it, the angrier he became. He protested to the Parks Department. The situation was outrageous, criminal. Surely something could be done. But Waterhouse was bluntly told not to waste his time with dead animals when there were so many living ones around. Waterhouse staggered away. His dinosaurs were broken, and so was his spirit. But in spite of the boss, Waterhouse would give America her dinosaurs. He left New York to create towering hadrosaur skeletons for Princeton University in New Jersey and the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. He stayed on at Princeton, yet again creating something that no one had ever seen before, the first series of paintings showing the development of life on Earth, including his beloved dinosaurs. Waterhouse was now 71 years old. It was time to go home. The Third Age, home again. Waterhouse returned to London, and exciting news. 30 iguanodon skeletons had been discovered in a coal mine in Belgium. It now appeared that Waterhouse's beloved iguanodon might have walked upright on its hind feet, and the spike on the nose, like a rhino's horn, might actually be a thumb. Imagine that! Waterhouse settled back into his cottage, fossil villa near the Crystal Palace, and on pleasant afternoons as he walked to the park and his marvelous creatures, he wondered, what other surprises would scientists dig up as they search the world for dinosaurs? Just as he had hoped, his models were the start of something wonderful, the world's first encounter with these ancient animals. People still come to the Crystal Palace Park in England to see the dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins. And while his American dinosaurs no longer stand, somewhere buried in Central Park, pieces of his dinosaurs remain. The end. This is what they looked like. I had never heard of an iguanodon before. Now, then, very good book. The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins. I hope you enjoyed it, sunshine. Have a great day, great night. Love you.